Fabulous. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm so excited about this session. How did I get okay? So I was just studying Second Samuel, story of David. I think I really love David. I love most of the people in the scripture, but I really love David and his approach to his emotions, his approach to processing them, his approach to healing, and his approach to dealing with them with God. So that being said, how many of us have heard when people say time heals all wounds, or just give it time and everything will go away. Yeah, or maybe you can just put this aside and deal with it when you can. While you might need some time to process your emotions, most times time doesn't heal all wounds. You actually have to go through healing. You actually have to deliberately go through a healing process and be determined in your heart to be healed. And what I noticed most of David's life, he was hurt a lot and he dealt with that hurt, he dealt with that feeling with God and moved on pretty quickly, which is why we're talking about this. So, looking at the book of Second Samuel 12:20, that's where this whole blueprint is taken from. The bounce back blueprint, healing God's way. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Living heartbreaks or problems or any kind of pain till later doesn't solve it. It does resurface. So we're going to be looking at a blueprint, taking a leaf from David's life and seeing that step by step process of healing completely with God in the equation. We're also going to look at what happens when you skip any of these processes. If you can do maybe three or and leave the remaining three because we've got six of them. Or, what does it look like when you've gone through it? Or what does it look like when you haven't? So we're going to be looking at that. Thank you so much for joining Perfume Miniatures, the Ruler Evangelist. I'm happy to see you guys online and so many others that will be joining us. So this recording, I'm also going to put it out on YouTube so you can catch up later if you're not able to join us live now. And it's also going to be on Spotify on my podcast called Joe's Unfiltered. So once you search for that on Spotify, you'll be able to listen to it over and over again if you need to. Many of us have gone through challenges, adversity, situations in our lives that have wounded us. Maybe deliberately we put ourselves in it without knowing, or life just happened. Whatever the case, there is healing in the Word of God. So I'm going to be discussing the 6 steps and I'm going to list them out for us. And then I'm going to be explaining and talking more about it. So before we get to this part, what led him to feeling like this? His child was sick to the point of death. Now, what happened, how the child was conceived? I'm talking about David for those of us just joining us. How this child was conceived or not conceived, we're not going to be focusing on that. We're going to be focusing on the child was sick to the point of death and he didn't want to lose his child. And he had cried and fasted and prayed and believed for a different outcome, believed for the child to live, believed for things to be different. Anyways, the child died. So when that happened, he didn't just go away and remain in despair or fight with God and start saying things like, whatever people say when things don't go their way. He took these very 6 steps, which led him to being healed quicker than most people would when they try to heal on their own, and led to him being restored in having a child called Solomon, which would not have been the case if the other child had lived. So what are these 6 steps? I've been saying 6 steps, so let me list them out and hint them a little bit, and then I'll go into what it looks like when the steps are skipped, and then how we can recognize them in our own lives and get our own healing. It could be, you might be thinking, whatever it is I've gone through is beyond healing, or I'm not just ready. I've tried all sorts of things and I'm not ready to try anything again. Well, maybe you can try this step-by-step plan and realize what you're missing or what you're not missing, and see how you can get that complete healing, because it's already been given to you. You just need to walk in it. So the first thing David did when everything didn't go his way, his child died. In fact, his palace guards or whatever were even scared to tell him that the child had died because of the way he was mourning when the child was sick. But then when they told him, oh, the child had died, he was like, oh, really? He got up. So the first step is getting up. He didn't remain in mourning. He chose to rise. Choosing to rise from any kind of pain, sadness, adversity, fall is a choice. So he chose to rise. He washed himself. That was the second thing. It can be a physical act of cleansing, and it symbolizes a fresh start. So generally, most people shower when they want to start their days or when they want to start their nights. But that was the second step. The third step, what he did next was put on lotions. He refreshed himself, refusing to carry the weight of sorrow into his next season. As far as a person is carrying the weight of sorrow, they would struggle to move to the next season. You have to leave it behind. Unfortunately, that's how it works. And the next thing, what he did was to change his clothes. So that's a shift in posture. He embraced renewal, shifted mindset, whatever it is, but he changed his clothes, changed his outlooks. Clothes, many times from the way a person dresses, you can tell what they do, professionally, or maybe how they feel, or the kind of style that they have, whatever it is. He changed his clothes. And now this fifth step in this bounce back plan, he worshipped the Lord. Even after disappointment, he prioritized God. And after that, he ate. Yes, food is important. He moved forward and took care of himself. So just listing it out, exactly the way it happened, the 6 steps in this blueprint is getting up, washing yourself, putting on lotions, changing of clothes, worshiping the Lord, and eating. So this could be symbolic. This could actually be exactly what it is, but I'm going to go into more detail. So for handling any kind of loss, I believe strongly that this would work. So it's not like you're denying what happened. It's that you're choosing faith and renewal and worship. It's that you're choosing to move forward. That's what it is. So one thing I admire about David, he knew how to express his emotions. I think for me personally, I used to feel like emotions were things I had to deal with by myself. And I didn't, know that I could take them to God. So I struggled a lot on my own, trying to figure things out until I could struggle no more. And I decided to take it to God. So, but David really knew how to do that. Like, even to the point where people offend him, will be like, well, God will fight for me. So he didn't deny that there was a loss. He didn't deny his pain. He had wept and everything, but he knew how to express his emotions, feel them, and heal from them. And his life was extraordinary. I am drawn to his heart. He had a very big heart, and I am drawn to that. So anyways, he acknowledged what happened. He didn't suppress or ignore what happened. He processed it with God. Unconsciously or consciously, many times we might suppress it, or many times you actually might not know what you feel. Numbness is an actual feeling that when we experience trauma, you just cannot explain how you feel. But when you even take that numbness to God, you can process it. So moving on, I have to stay on course now. If we skim through our trials and move on, what happens is that we temporarily forget, but since healing hasn't taken place, the experience hides. And you find out that, you might be repeating patterns, you might be having the same experiences, or a little thing can just like trigger you and you're wondering, is this really why I'm so mad? But that is a sign of an unhealed person, or whenever we find ourselves that we're not healed in a particular area, that might happen. So I'm just going to describe a little bit what true healing looks like, and then what surface level change looks like. And then we'll go into what happens when you skip a process. So true healing is a change in mindset, a change that's like the change in clothes. You find out that when somebody is truly healed, they don't sound like themselves, or the people you used to know. Let me put it that way. They sound different because their minds have been healed and changed. They can even talk you through the experience without pain. When there's a residue of the past, if somebody narrates their experience to you, you can feel the pain in what they say. The thing is about communication is that I think there's a graph somewhere, and most of us might already know, but it's actually 55% of communication is in your body language, and 38 is in your tone, and only 5% is in your words. So even if somebody is, saying something nice and it's actually not true, or they don't actually feel it, you can tell in the way that the communication comes across to you, or you just feel, you're not just feeling open to it. So if, for instance, I was talking about this without actually believing it, most times people might be able to figure that out as well somehow. So what true healing looks like is that, you can feel the wholeness from when the person, communicates, and in their worship, they surrender their emotions to God. But a surface level change might just focus on appearance, trying to look nice, trying to buy nice things, dress nice. But the person would probably have a hard heart because that part has not been healed. And surface level change runs to distractions, but never actually heals. So you just know that not all glow ups are real. Some are like a costume. And true healing doesn't happen until you go through these steps, especially processing them with God and leaving them behind. So for David, of course, his worship wasn't just an act of devotion. It was a turning point that allowed him to move forward. Yeah. So now, what does it look like when somebody skips a step in this process? What does it look like? How does it impact on the person's life? How does it feel to you as a person if you realize that you've skipped any of these steps? Personally, I think I mentioned earlier, not knowing that you could process your emotions with God, and then maybe not because you can't process it, you just figure out, well, I'll just forget about it. But what happened, to me was that I realized going through a different kind of difficult time, I actually was remembering a past difficult time. So that was just an evidence to show that there wasn't proper healing. I just forgot about it because trauma can actually make you forget, like you actually don't remember what happened. But that's where God comes in when you do the fifth step, which is the worship. And then, sometimes some things you think you've forgotten about, He'll bring it up to the surface and then allow you to heal from them. So, step one, getting up. What does it look like when a person doesn't get up? So, you find out that person is holding grudges, or maybe refusing to accept reality and revisiting the experience. Personally, I was in a situation once, and I think I was just like numb because I couldn't believe what happened. So not being able to, no, I wasn't able to believe what happened. I wasn't able to think. And that's what happens when you don't get up. It's more or less like the person is just panicking and moving around in circles and all that. So you need to get up, release whoever you need to release, refuse, accept that this has happened, acknowledge it, and then move forward to the next step. So sometimes as well, what can prevent people from getting up is that they keep on reliving the experience. So what happens is that they're trapped in a cycle of pain, and that's not going to let you go move forward. The next step is washing yourself. So just as David did. So like I said, it can be a physical act of cleansing. Sometimes people go through stuff that they don't even get up. You don't want to get out of your bed for days. That happens. So it can be that physical act of actually getting up to say, okay, I'm going to engage and take care of this temple that God has given me. And what it can look like is maybe jumping into a new situation without processing the last one. It can be a new relationship, it can be a new job, it can be a new marriage, whatever it is, pretending that it's over when you're not. Many times people do that as well. Oh no, it's fine, but it's really not fine, and they are hurting. So that means that they haven't, you know, decided to let go and make room for a fresh start. Next thing he did was anointing his body with lotions, and that what that looks like when a person skips that process. So you can have someone who gets up and says, you know what, I'm not going to hold any grudge. I've moved on. I'm fine. I'm healed with it. And then they actually like maybe cleanse themselves, look okay in quotes, but they don't actually, they're not like themselves. You find out that maybe they might let themselves go physically or emotionally or spiritually, or you find out that person is maybe overworking, neglecting rest and nourishment, or staying in survival mode instead of thriving. So this means that the person has probably moved on to, worship in quotes, but once that step is missing, you will find out that there will be a gap. So that's for the anointing. The next is changing clothes, a shift in posture, embracing renewal. If a person continues to act like a victim, or even when the situation ends, or maybe refuse to see yourself beyond the pain, sometimes you can go through a very difficult time and you might start to define yourself by that difficult time, but you are not your difficult time. If you've not listened to last week, when your hair grows back, about renewal and restoration, please do that. Lets us in more a bit about this. But if you are expecting new doors to open while still dressed in the mindset of the old season, it's not going to play out like that, because that has to be left behind. The clothes have to be changed. There needs to be a shift in posture. There needs to be a readiness for the new. And then when a person might actually do this, get up, forgive, all that, take care of themselves, acknowledge that what happened has happened, and move on from it, not see themselves as a victim. But if they skip worship, what happens is that they start to rely on therapy. Reliance is different from using. So I would always encourage, if possible, please use therapy. It actually changed my life. But then relying on it is a different thing, or relying on self-help books, or relying on distractions but avoiding God. So you might find a situation where that might happen, and maybe the person might just maybe become bitter in some way, or maybe bitter against God. Like, I've healed from all this. Yeah, I feel better now and all that. But I don't know if I want to do this with God anymore because of what happened. But they might actually move forward, but with a hardened heart, and that's not healing. That's like maybe trading an old problem for a new one. But with God, when healing happens, it's absolute, and you don't trade one problem for the other. That when you talk about that experience, is from a healed perspective, in a way that you want to help others, and not from relieving and marinating in that pain. So worship and surrendering to God is a very vital step in this blueprint. And the point of surrender is coming to the point where you no longer try to control the outcomes. You no longer try to, you're not bothered about what anybody else thinks except what God thinks. You are sure that whatever has happened or that will happen would be for your benefit. So that's what worship, is like, because you surrender. And then a person might do all this, and then the last step, eating. So I did make mention of food. Now it can also be food. It is food that you eat, and food that your spirit and your soul eats, like what you listen to, what you watch, and things like that. So you would need to nourish yourself properly to move on. Listen to the right kind of messages, read the right kind of books. I mean, watch the right kind of movies, whatever it is, entertainment. Let it be ones that gear you towards that healing. So if a person doesn't bother about that aspect, maybe they go through everything, but they're like, well, I'm okay with that. What happens is that they might move forward, but they might lack the energy to sustain that new season. A new season needs some level of energy and strength that only God can give to sustain. So if they don't nourish themselves properly with the right thing, that might happen. Another thing that might happen is that they might rush into the next thing, but they'll feel drained. So you might actually feel drained, whenever you're stepping into a new season, and that God has put before you and you've healed, you don't feel drained. You're excited. It's like a new adventure. You're excited to go forward with it. So if you find yourself feeling drained, you want to step back a bit and examine what you might have overlooked, because that could really happen, and God will help with that. So another thing is, when you find a person avoiding joy and pleasure because they feel guilty, they haven't really healed, which takes us back to the anointing part, where you find a person in survival mode, overworking and things like that. Then you can find also, if a person hasn't fed themselves now with food and also their spirit with the right thing, they might act fine, but they feel empty inside. And you know what the Bible says about when you leave an empty space, it definitely gets filled with what you didn't plan for, and it is worse than the last time. So what I'm just going to say as I move forward to, talking about the steps a bit more, is delayed or incomplete healing is very, very dangerous. Like, some people might look healed on the outside, but they are still wounded inside. And some other people are running on fumes. And that's why, when I came across this 6-step process, I was like, I can't wait to share it. And I can't wait to, go through it over and over myself, because while you might be healed from something, we'll go from glory to glory. So there is always something that God will bring to the surface for you to work on. And that depends on your yieldedness and your availability, of course, and your, humility to go through the process with Him. But the thing is that when you see people like that incompletely healed or not healed at all, or delaying their healing for whatever reason, skipping steps, or not, or even refusing to acknowledge it from the get-go, it pours out from the interactions you have with them. It pours out from your experiences with them, and they can go on to hurt other people. So not necessarily because they are bad, but because they haven't healed. And that's why I'll say this is very important. So now, going through the steps a little bit more, getting up from the ground, we've talked about that. I want to encourage us today to choose to rise from grief, choose to rise from disappointments, choose to rise from pain. In life, we'll face many losses. We might face, it could be jobs, it could be relationships, it could even be dreams, hopes. But the first step is refusing to stay stuck. Get up from the ground. Stop replaying the experience. Stop, refuse any kind of self-pity. Stand up spiritually and emotionally. We're not saying that what happened didn't happen. David acknowledged. We acknowledge, but we refuse to stay down. We get up. And then second step, washing yourself. So after a heartbreak or a bad experience, most of us have experienced that. And there is really need for spiritual and emotional washing. I don't mean anything weird like in a river or something like that. No, I mean releasing bitterness, shame, and regret. Sometimes you might think it was my fault. I should have known better. I mean, I'm particularly guilty about that one. But it doesn't do anything that is heavy like guilt and shame. It doesn't come from God. And we must release those if we want to go on. Thinking about it in this manner, like, no one puts on lotion before washing themselves. I mean, you shouldn't do that, babe. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to release myself from everything holding me back, because at the end of the day, you harm yourself alone. So you have letting go of any kind of negativity is washing yourself, not letting your past define you, is washing yourself off. And the next step, putting on lotions, of course, is refreshing yourself and preparing for the next season. So like David, he didn't just move on like I used to do. He refreshed himself, showing he wasn't carrying the past into the future. Taking care of yourself and getting back to being you. Self-care isn't selfish, and not waiting until the perfect time to do that. It starts in the now. There is really no perfect time to do anything. The perfect time is when you start. So refreshing and preparing for the next season. You can't go into the next season without preparing for it. And I think many times people get frustrated because they expect the next season to happen, but they aren't prepared for it. They are the version of themselves that exists at this moment in time is not the version that can live that experience. Now, changing of clothes is a shift in identity or mindset. Sometimes we go through things and unconsciously those things, we might let those things define us. We might you can hear somebody saying things like, "Oh, I know maybe I'm not careful." And then when you find out, you find out that they were actually told that they didn't even, when you find out that, why do you think you're not careful? They don't have an answer for that. And it's about focusing on what your true identity is, which is what God says about you. So changing a shift in your mindset, what you think about yourself, what you think about, your life, and all that, and how you process situations, expecting the best for yourself. If you've gotten up, you've washed yourself, you put on lotions, you're changing, putting on fresh clothes, I believe. So you're not going to be expecting the worst if you're wanting to walk into the season that God has prepared for you. So it's there would usually be a visible sign that the season of mourning is over and you're ready to step into newness. So I'll encourage us today, put on joy, not grief. A change of environment might be necessary. It might be temporarily, it might be permanently. Changing of your conversations as well. When the mindset changes and the identity changes, you no longer sound like the broken person. You no longer sound like the unhealed person. So you don't want to engage in conversations that are contrary to your new identity. And changing, of course, your expectations. Expectations are very important, from mourning to joy. And it's a decision that your identity is what God says. So I was just going to say that I said it before, I'm just going to say it again, that it is a decision to go through healing. Even God cannot heal you without your consent or somebody. You have to decide that, you know what, whatever it is I'm carrying, I need to heal. And that is at the point where you rise up and go through the steps. The next is worshiping the Lord. Of course, surrender and trust. I can't say this enough. Surrendering in the sovereignty of God. This was a key turning point for David. David acknowledged God despite the outcome. Many times, when you find yourself, going into a frenzy when things don't work out the way you plan, that's because your trust for God and love is being tampered with, and you cannot love someone without trusting them. So I want to encourage us to center back to our love and trust for God. Despite the outcome, let the worship be. I was listening to something during the week and talking about, an attitude of thanksgiving. And he was saying that many times when people, want to give thanks to God, they feel like, if they're doing him a favor, or, maybe like it's something that God is hungry for, we have to thank him. No, like worshiping God is when you worship God for who he is. And of course, praising God is and praising him for what he has done. So what he has done is good always, because God is a good God. So I just want us to, that is a point of surrender, irrespective of the outcome or what you see. It is a point in healing that is necessary, because skipping that would take us back to those kind of symptoms I talked about before. And for those of us just joining, I'm going to put this up, on everywhere you can stream, Spotify, YouTube, so you can go back and listen. And the final step, eating. Yep. So for David, eating wasn't just a physical need. Well, of course he needed to eat because he had fasted for days, but it was about spiritual and emotional transition. So in some cultures, like eating after a period of mourning is embracing joy again. It's like a declaration of life, and food is part of that. So, God sees your nourishment as part of the healing journey. As far as I'm concerned, like if nourishment wasn't important, it wouldn't be written in the scriptures. So it is important, and we're talking about the meals you eat, and also about what your soul eats, what you listen to, what you watch. It's very important in nourishing. If your soul is not nourished, if you go through the 5 steps and your nourishment is suffering, then it would just kind of be a waste of time, because whatever it is you expose yourself to might actually harm or heal you. So, another thing that I want to talk about is that his reaction shocked people. I think sometimes when you heal, people are shocked that you've healed. I actually don't know why this is the case, but or maybe they're measuring by the way that they would want to process things. But I want to encourage us that this is actually like an interesting blueprint to follow, because it doesn't take God years to heal a person. It's only with the snap of a finger. So why are we expecting our healings to take ages? So granted, you have to go through the steps, and everybody's process is the same. It's different. Sorry about that. Everybody's process is different. Everybody's, way of processing things are different. But I believe that if you go through the steps, irrespective of the time it takes you, you will get through to true healing, because you're not excluding God, because you're choosing to move forward, because you're choosing to let go of negativity, because you're also choosing to have a shift in mindset and a shift in identity and worshiping the Lord. So it's hard that anyone does that and remains the same. Now, what are the things that try to keep us in pain longer than necessary? There are a number of things, but I've just come up with like my top 3. First one is guilt. That is a major, major one. When you keep on thinking, I should have done better, I won't encourage that. That is a horrible one. It's like a weight on your chest. Anyway, next one is regret. Regret is also a horrible one. And next one is anger. There might be many more, but I'll just talk about these. These keep you in pain longer than necessary. And you find out that, the person might be going, there's also shame. Yeah, there's also shame. Of course, from anger, it leads to bitterness and so on and so forth. But healing God's way means moving forward in faith, not in guilt, not in regret, not in anger, not with a hardened heart. It means moving forward in actual sense. So I just want us to pay attention. When you find that guilt creeping in, find that regret creeping in, find yourself getting angry over and over again, just recognize that this is something that is trying to keep you in pain longer than necessary. And I would say, don't stand for it. Don't stand for it at all. So now, I was talking about how David's reaction shocked people. There are always going to be people that will be shocked by your healing, but that is not to say that you should shrink back. That is not to say that, you should try to explain that you're not healed. Many times, if you want to listen to last session, many times you actually start walking in it before you actually see it, and starting to walk in it would help you see it quicker. So, there might be scenarios that try to bring you back to that point, but you always have to remember that I am healed, and I choose to walk in this healing. I choose to walk in this restoration. I've gotten up. I'm not letting any of this get me down anymore. And, God will take control, because you've already surrendered in step 5. So now, after David's healing, that was when Solomon was conceived. And it's very symbolic for me, because I know that like your next season of fruitfulness, or whatever it is you're waiting for, would come when you've positioned yourself in a way that you can receive it. So it didn't come when he was mourning. It came after he had moved forward. I don't want to imagine what it would feel like if he kept on, mourning, if he kept on, I don't know, whatever it was that was, but kept on going through those motions. Then I don't know if Solomon would have been conceived. He wouldn't even have the strength to conceive Solomon in the first place. But he chose to let go and move forward. And that's when, that child was born, who we know, went on to be a great king and so on and so forth. So I just want to encourage us, let go of the last season. Not only your actions, not only physically. We're not talking about a surface level healing now. We're talking about total healing God's way, inside out. It always starts on the inside before it shows. So let go of the last season in your mind and in your actions so that you can walk into the new season. So I'm just going to talk a bit more about a few examples of, of some of the difficulties and setbacks that we might face that might put us in a situation where we will find ourselves mourning. And after that, I'll go through the 6 steps again, and then we'll wrap up. So a very common one is, breakups, relationship loss, any of that kind. It could be, a professional relationship, a romantic relationship. When we're following this blueprint that has been set in the scripture, we don't stay in heartbreak mode. We get up, we let go of that season, learn whatever it is we're supposed to learn, we heal, and we worship God and prepare for what is next. If you don't prepare for what is next, you might get something else, but it will be like a repeated cycle. So you have to go through this healing so that you can get what God has prepared, get your Solomon. Another example of, one of the various pain that we might go through, career setback. This is a very tough one. And it can throw us in a situation where, I think in a world where a lot of times people define themselves as the job that they do, it can be a hard one when whatever it is you describe yourself as is no longer available. Personally, I've never liked that. Like, what do you do for a living question? I don't know. It just kind of ticks me off. And I've many times I find myself saying things that are not true, or in the past, or maybe just waving it aside if I don't really know the person. But it's good to, you need to have a job, obviously, for whatever reason, but it's not what makes you. The true identity is who God says you are, and God sees you the way that He made you, not based on your accomplishments, not based on your career, not based on your rank, whatever it is. So when a career setback happens, we might not remember all of this, and we might start to wallow, or we might just feel totally out of sync. But what do we do when we follow this blueprint? We refresh ourselves, we rebrand, and we seek God for a new direction, and we stay with God, total surrender to God, not seeking God and trying to figure it out. That doesn't work, because it will lead to, like I talked about it before, it will lead to like you trying to help yourself, and then maybe you might move past it, but then have a hardened heart. And we're trying to heal, to have a new heart. We're not trying to heal and become, build walls around ourselves and become, something else. And then another thing that many of us might have gone through, financial struggles. This one is very common, and I've experienced it myself, and it was just like, what is happening here? I've experienced everything that I listed. Okay, but financial struggles is tough because we have needs and we need money, So what happens? Instead of wallowing or feeling sorry for yourself, you realign with God, re-strategize, and trust God. One thing that is common in all this thing, everything I'm saying, is that step 5, which is worship, surrender to God. That's what makes the difference. Another thing could be unanswered prayers, like David, believing God for something, believing, declaring, waiting, hoping, and then you get a no. And then what do you do? Do you start complaining? I heard something interesting during the week, and I think I was listening to that was I forgot now. Anyway, it says murmuring is slave language. And you find them, in where the children of Israel were murmuring, and they stayed in the wilderness for longer than necessary. So you are a king and a queen and a priest, so you don't want to speak a language that is not you don't want to speak a language that is not yours. So anyways, I don't know, how did I get there? Whatever. An unanswered prayer. So you're believing God for something and you don't get a yes.